Hello, my name is Robert Rickover. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I also teach on a regular basis in Toronto, Canada. I've been teaching for just over 35 years now. And during the last 5 years or so, an increasing amount of my teaching has been online. And this is now the fourth in a series of short videos on how to use Alexander Technique directions for your own benefit. In the last session, I brought up the topic of the whole question of being potentially distracted from using a direction by the nice results that it brings about. And that's going to be true not just of the directions that I've been using so far, which is I am free, but the two additional directions that I want to introduce to you today. The first one, the first new direction, actually has two possible variants. One is my neck is free, or another alternative for that could be my throat is free. Now, if you're a speaker or a singer, or you're a teacher or anyone who uses their voice a lot, this is going to be a particularly useful one for you to experiment with. And the kinds of experiments that I would suggest doing are pretty analogous to what we did earlier with walking. In this case, you might deliver a little imaginary speech, and the first few seconds, you use the direction I'm free or my throat is free, and then you throw it away or bring in a nonsense thought and just continue on with what you're saying. And then after a few seconds, you would bring it back again. This particular direction, if you are going to use it for vocal activities, it might be worthwhile to record it or have someone listen to it and give you feedback. But I don't want to imply that this direction is just for speaking or singing or anything like that. It's a universal direction. And any of you who've had any Alexander Technique experience will recognize that it's addressing a part of our anatomy, our neck, that region between the base of our skull and more or less the top 7 vertebrae of our spine is the neck. That region is a particularly important region of our bodies in terms of how it affects our overall coordination and balance. So we're going from a very general direction I've been using so far, I'm free, which, as I mentioned at the time, has a big advantage in that it's tough for people to mess it up in terms of trying to implement it. It's so far off the wall, as it were, that it's hard to imagine how I might intervene to help out. But my neck is free or my throat is free, people start getting much better at intervening. And I say better, I put that in quotes. They're much more able to mess things up by perhaps bringing to bear some extra ideas they have learned about how the neck should function, that sort of thing. So the session I just did, of course, addressed that kind of issue. But it just bear in mind that it is comes into effect for this direction quite a bit. The second direction I want to introduce to you also has two ways of expressing it. One is my breathing is free, or I am freely breathing. That's a really powerful one, and I suggest for that one that you do your initial experiments with it lying down. If you're familiar with Alexander Constructive Rest, that would be a perfect place to experiment with it. But you could also do it just lying down in bed. Just lie down as though you were going to go to sleep or take a nap, but just bring that thought lightly to bear. I'm free, my breathing is free, and avoid the temptation to help out because it's going to be kind of strong, and see what happens. And you may have to experiment a bit with that, but I think you're going to find that your breathing is going to change, and in some cases it changes pretty dramatically, which of course leads to the other pitfall of self-directing, that that dramatic change in your breathing is really interesting, and you're very likely to get sucked into it, and you'll have to then just do what we talked about before, or just start over again. So now with that third direction, my breathing is free. Once you've experimented a bit using it lying down, and it's clear to you that it's useful, then you could experiment in other situations. You might explore it in just sitting, for example. But that particular direction is a very interesting one to use in walking or running or any activity where there's a lot going on, swimming, for example, precisely because it's often one that you're not going to notice the direct impact of the direction. If you're running, you may not notice instantly a change in your breathing because it could be swamped by all the arm and leg movements. And that can be an advantage because you're not going to be tempted to get caught up in the results. And the three directions that I've talked about, I'm free, the most general of all. My neck is free or my throat is free, very specific, intervening at a very important part of your body. And then my breathing is free, also intervening at a very important function of your body, and as well as an important area of your body. And I have found in my teaching that those three directions are very good go-to directions, any one of them, when you feel like it might be useful to change how you're functioning, and you don't have the mental energy to decide, well, what's the best direction for this situation. Either or any one of those three will be helpful. They all basically take you to the same place, but they take you there in a little different pathway. So my feeling is it's nice to have a basket of directions that you can pick from, but it's also, and we're going to discuss some of the additional directions in a later series, but these three are, to me, go-to directions that anyone can use anytime. So that's it for this session. I'm going to do one more, and I think that's going to conclude the initial series on using Alexander technique directions.